Hello, Ellie, Madfinger, and Raksha, and Meandering Mystic. Hello. Hello, Deborah, and Foxadre, and Mari. Okay, I just turned on the camera, so I know you can hear my voice, but my picture. Hey, Lee. There we go. Hello, everybody. So, man, getting ready for this show was something else. Because as the title implies, we're getting to the end of a shift, a Dakini shift, and a new one to start in a few days. And it's kind of interesting. I thought, I felt like, okay, we're winding down the shift, and the new moon is tomorrow. And at least I'm getting, hello, Deborah Rubenfeld. And on this kind of the closing day, or else tomorrow, there was almost like a last burst of Dakini energy. And the one that I was kind of getting today was Green Tara. And I got this interesting perception of like a portal closing. And at one level, I get, the shift changing, so that's going to be a change of energy that in itself is a form of, I guess, portal closing of sorts. But I really was getting other, signals. One of the signals I got and kind of started last night was I have been a part of forums, and I'm not leaving per se, but I felt that there was a lot of energy. I probably put more energy and material into the One Truth forum than I ever have in a month period before. It was, enormously inspired to kind of create awareness, thoughtfulness, openness to receive new things, or to receive things that have lied dormant. Because especially with green tar, bringing up the green things, that's some seeds that might have been our subconscious, them coming, starting to flower. And boy, I have to admit, this shift, I flowered very much creatively. Got more words written to songs that still need to be completed, some almost completed, than I've ever gotten done in any spate of time, really. It was like a supercharged creative period. And the Dakini Bhudevi is very much about creativity and aesthetics and dance and music that goes with it. It was very, very inspiring. And then Green Tara has her, there's like that whole spring energy to her. And then starting about sometime yesterday and very much increasingly today. And I'm definitely, I'm asking everybody here, but you know, Fox, Dre, and Madfinger, you know, I think you're a little bit more into the practice, so it'd be interesting for you to share. Also, but anybody, please, if I don't know whether or not whether any of you out there tuned into this particular lunar cycle to actually kind of get into the mood of what's going on. Ah, I like that, Ellie. But today there was like a real sense of closure, at least with posting on places like forum, the forum I've been a part of. I mean, I'm not saying I won't post there, but let's say that of the much tilling of soil and planting of seeds, at the end of the month, it just seemed like, okay, it really seems like the text format is get a little unproductive. I mean, I find it's a good medium for kind of reading the moods of people. Hello, Christian Martin. Like, you know, following live chats, even if you mute the speaker, following live chats can be very interesting. It's interesting. When I went to this, I wanted to grab a name that was part of the Dark Journalist chat. So I'm going to be speaking about Dark Journalist a little bit tonight. His X series, but especially the last one he did, where Ahriman was a focus. And it was a name I wanted to get, and the full name. I know it's Occult something because he was on CW show last night. I was on there briefly also. And a CW chanter, that is, for those who don't know what CW means. And but apparently, Dark Journalist disabled the playback to his chats. They had been enabled, and now he disabled them. And that we can do that. Occult fan, thank you, Lee. And Occult fan was interesting because there was that last Dark Journalist show had a lot of triggery things in it, and I mean that in a good way. Good job, Raksha. I'm reading some stuff in the chat. I won't give it all away. Shamanic code. Yeah. I don't know why. Maybe somebody requested it. Maybe some of the stuff that was going on in there made him take it down. But there was some information in there that certainly could ignite some neurons. To me, in a way that could be very clearing, could be kind of additional stuff, especially to from a Gnostic perspective. Interestingly enough, I mean, I studied Steiner for a while. I think biodynamic farming is probably the superior organic or any kind of farming method around. And John Lamb Lash spent a lot of time studying Steiner. Matter of fact, he was deep into a Steiner phase when he, I guess, began the receiving or got the whole Terma of Gaia awakening. So it's kind of interesting to be listening to some of this really deep stuff from Steiner, information from Steiner, and listening to it sitting, in your gnosis, let's say, which is a different sitting in a kind of a Gnostic gnosis, and then viewing the world is you know, different perspective, because you're connected in, you're plugged into something different. You really are. It's not the same. Although you don't have to be a Gnostic, you can. Native Americans also can, who still keep the old ways. Anybody who keeps the old ways are kind of plugged in. So the stuff about Ahriman and how that even ties in with, it could almost be a shortening of the name Ahura Mazda. And the fact that he left out that in Steiner's speak, there was kind of like two demiurgic, he didn't use the word, but two primary demiurgic energies of Lucifer and Ahriman. And but he's focused on Ahriman, and I think that was not an accident. I don't know if it was interesting watching Daniel, because I mean, I thought he did an excellent delivery. I think his X series has been very well researched. I've heard some people say that he's all over the place. If one does not have the wherewithal to connect all the dots, then it will seem like it's all over the place. But if you can connect those dots, then you have a very coherent web that you can read from. So I feel that in many ways, given the information that Daniel was sharing, he was having some subconscious influence. And there was a couple of things that he mentioned. Yes, Foxadre. And that's why these names are kind of deceptions in themselves. But the people like Steiner, to me, were not deceiving us. They were being deceived by some very, you know, some beings that have gotten quite a bit of intel from us over the thousands of years they have been interacting with us, especially those who you know, do, I'd say, magical journeying, shamanic journeying, and were not just had, I guess, they had the ability to go journeying, but maybe weren't as schooled as they might have wanted to have been, or maybe they didn't have that as an option. But when I was, the whole thing about, well, again, as the true Lucifer is Sophia, but there's also this other Lucifer, you know, this name grabbing that goes on, and appropriation. And appropriation is the #1 game, you know, appropriation, urinating on us, on our spots, just general fuckery. And hello, Robert Elder. And you know what? Maybe I'm gonna go to my camera for a second. I won't stay away too long, but I'm trying to pick my words carefully, and it's not like I prepared a lot for this. Has been kind of like going through me today, and this is a good place for me to start because I was a little hot 10 minutes before showtime, but I don't want to get distracted. Part I think with the closing of the shift, Green Tower can be quite ferocious. So, but that person that Lee named, I can't. It's. As I'm trying to get this out, I'm a little bit not in my normal consciousness as I try to get this out. And I don't know how well this will work. I might have to break this and just get into conversation. There was a lot of stimulating, triggering things in Daniel's last show, the one about Ahriman. And that gentleman who was on, I can't remember his name and I don't need to, who was on CW's show last night, to me showed signs of something that I had experienced in 1988, which is a spontaneous Kundalini rising. This was before I had done kind of like, more Western esoteric magic study, but I hadn't really done a chakra study, and I was unaware. I was aware of having amazing revelations at what seemed like one level, and then getting to another level, and what was the information coming in had a distinct flavor there, and then getting to another level, and that had another distinct layer to it. And that went on for a few things. At the time I didn't know there were 7 chakras, so I wasn't able to keep count, but I do remember like these leaps every couple of days, kind of getting to another place and kind of change in focus. And then in the final thing I felt like was I just kind of exploded out of the top of my head, went into extreme bliss, a perception that was almost LSD-like, and thought I had all the answers, including some answers that were completely nuts. And I remember that very well, because now when I encounter other people who I sometimes see, I go, ooh, I think they might have had a spontaneous Kundalini arising. I totally can be very, not only compassionate, I can empathize. I have been there. I know what it was. I know what it was like to come out of it, do a review of where I had been, and going, wow, I was pretty fucking crazy there for a while, wasn't I? And in a very delicious way. And fortunately, the friends that are around me, I've always been, being an Aspie, I've always been, a little bit tuned into things. So this was a dramatic shift, but it was almost as if like I had gone from what normies perceive as a little nutty to a lot nutty. Okay, I think I kind of I was starting to slip in almost into a trance, and I'm kind of coming out of it. So I think I can join come into here. And but there were some interesting concepts Daniel was presented that I had never quite heard before, and I just have to. It was amazing how much reading he had done, and then was able to speak extemporaneously on it. Pretty impressed with that kind of research on any subject, and then be able to really handle yourself in a spontaneous manner with it. I thought he fielded questions really well. Good. I hope good. Mystic, meandering one. I guess I'll call you for short. And yeah, that exploding out of the top of your head. And last night, I mean, I don't know who saw the CW Chanter show last night with that fellow, occult something. You could see, I mean, he had that Kundalini fire. That, and you really are quite, you're quite sure that what you're experiencing is kind of like a cosmic truth for the world. It's quite an exhilarating experience. And then after the fact, when you kind of get a chance to unpack some of your own stuff, while not, soaring through the stars, it's an interesting recovery. It's all good. And I think that as we either recognize it either through our own experience or hearing other people talking about it, if we see more of this, and I think there's a chance we could, we'll know what's going on and not get too like, oh man, why, this person's like, thinks they have all the answers. That's just part of it, like enjoy what they're going through with them. Yeah, it's quite a bit to have them unpack, but they have been, their top of their head opened up and a lot of stuff poured in. And it is a psychotic stage. Now, psychosis doesn't mean that you're violent or anything. To me, what psychotic is that your psyche suddenly gets like very swollen. Psychosis, would be like a swelling. And this, because I don't want to use the word infection, but infections create swelling. And so in this case, the psyche gets so much in at once, it gets swollen, and it gets very heated. It's very hot. Yeah, I really want to follow the chat, because what I'm talking about is something that we as a community, especially those of us who were there, experienced. And what's interesting is that what we were experiencing from a cult fan was a result of the information delivered by Dark Journalist. And which is a result of him really unpacking a lot of the Steiner stuff and the mystery school stuff. And thank you, Willie. And why understanding who we are and where we're connected, and that there are, Ahriman is an archon, and again, once again, for the Gnostics here who have a different understanding, hello Amanda, when we talk about the Steiner, Lucifer, and Ahriman, they kind of seem like the two primary archons. So in many ways, I'm wondering, okay, I haven't finished unpacking it, but I feel like in many ways they are almost like the archangels Michael and Gabriel, and getting who's who is kind of unpacking a bit. And it's also very interesting that, I think almost everybody knows that originally the books that Alice Bailey, who followed Annie Besant and kind of took over Theosophy, was originally not the Lucas Trust, but the Lucifer Trust. Hello, Charles. And like case in point, according to Islamic tradition, Muhammad, who is claimed to have been illiterate, take the word, received his dictation from the angel Gabriel. So, to me, there's a little clue there, and I want to be gentle with some of the stuff here. It's one of the reasons why I do want to have starting very soon, probably early on in the next shift, want to gather with a few people and unpack some of this stuff. Thank you, Oswald. I enjoyed the tambor too. But unpacking it with a select crew, and then once we do some unpacking, maybe we can expand it and share. One of the lessons in many ways I got from all of the output that I did in the forum, enormous output, was that here I am, and then output from other members was not output, but critique or riding the energy wave. So, in other words, there was certainly attention drawn by the output, but much of it was for critique and, look at me, I have something to say also, but basically they had nothing to say until I had something to say. It reminds me a little bit of all the critics who panned Led Zeppelin when they came out. They gave horrible reviews to their first albums. In their critic's wisdom, but the people had other ideas about Led Zeppelin. Hello, Oswald. And so critics live off of the content of artists. It's a pretty parasitic living. And so I kind of came away with a bad taste, especially in text format, because again, text has liabilities in communication, and then if you do kind of really kind of use language in a way that is less open to misinterpretation, you end up with walls of words, because you have to get ahead of a oh, this could be misinterpreted, so let me explain it this way. Oh, it gets crazy. And so especially now, I mean, we're using modern technology. At one level, we could say it's archontic technology, but again, it's all in how we use it. Whether or not, for once in a while, they actually, they give to us, but they didn't give shit to us. They're always taking from us. That's one of the things about the magicians interacting with them over thousands of years. What they've been doing is gathering intel from us. And and then they'll get intel from one magician, and another magician will approach them for information, and then they, they're kind of like this one, they learned this from this one, and they just kind of use their own intel gathering, and then they give it back to those who didn't get that piece. It's pretty interesting dynamic. Hello, Amanda. I'm not sure if I said hello to you. I'm pretty much in my regular consciousness, but I'm slipping in and out a little bit. Yeah, it is an Archon Ponzi scheme. Exactly. Very well put. And this is what makes the whole like, let's say, like the information that people like Steiner are getting. He's getting great information in many cases. Biodynamic farming is great, but and it seems like it comes from these ascended masters, and it's the information that we have developed over tens of thousands of years, and either through observing or interacting with us, they are able to copy and paste it. They copy, and then when we ask them, hey, can you do this, they just give us a paste. Sometimes it's a really sloppy cut and paste, and sometimes they've gotten a very good copy, so then they can paste something very well. I think the interesting thing that I had never heard before, and as a concept, I don't know, is it being truth? But as a concept, was this mention of the 8th sphere, and how Ahriman was getting this information through the through the projections that they create, the false projections. And this is something that John Lash has spoken about, how the archons work through our mind. And I'm quite sure he got confirmation in his own Gnostic intel. But there was, when it comes to the eighth sphere, we're kind of getting, apparently Steiner was onto it a little bit, in that, in other words, they create illusions that we react to, and then the reactions are then kind of copied, and then apparently these copyings are being fed into something, what I guess in Steiner language would be the eighth sphere. That really triggered, stimulated me. It wasn't triggering. It was just like, there's something here. And once again, the terms themselves are not what I'm really speaking to. It was the concepts that these terms were kind of alluding to. Hello, Jeff. And there were two things that were kind of connected into this eighth sphere. Now I think a lot of us here might be familiar with the term loosh. And so, but that's very much, the loosh seems to be tied into emotional energy. Now some interesting things that were shared by Daniel, and there was certainly things that I wanted to digest a bit. And one is in the separation of, again, Steiner's terms of Lucifer and Ahriman. Lucifer held the quality of air and water, and Ahriman held earth and fire. So when I look at them, air and water would be the emotions and the intellect, or the second and third chakra. And then with Ahriman, it would be the base chakra, earth, and then the fire would kind of ties in a little bit with the fourth chakra. And in each case, you have the polarities. You have the male and female principle. You have earth as female principle, or yin principle is better term. Fire yang principle with Ahriman. With Lucifer, you have water yin. You have the air as yang. And so the interesting thing was he didn't mention loosh. And I kind of realized that loosh would be more of the energy that gets, the emotional energy that gets generated when the second and third chakras are not aligned well, and you get all of that, you get plugged in. You start having those dialogues in your head. You start getting that repeat reel over and over again. You can't get the thoughts out of your head. So that generates a flow out of you. And the word loosh is from Robert Monroe. So again, we're using terms. We're going to use the terms to describe effects and not get hung up on terms, because that's where hung up is a form of being stuck, and we don't want to get stuck. So then when it comes to Ahriman and the earth and the fire, and this whole idea of Ahriman taking the imaginations, in other words, they kind of create this false reality, whether in our head or in the world, and then our creativity, our perception of this false reality generates ideas and concepts and they are part of our imagination and our capacity that they don't have. The archons don't have it. And I have to not look at the chat. And I'll get it back. So there's a certain amount of stealing imagination. So in other words, they kind of do this form of projection. For some reason, I almost want to use the word gaslighting. And I think in a loose term, it might work. So they put out these illusory concepts, or just things that we perceive, and then we react to them. Now, at one level, we're going to, we'll react emotionally, but at another level, there's a certain amount of that imaginary fire that we have. And the way Daniel kind of mentioned Steiner's explanation of that, these reactions, which I saw as our imaginations and our fire, were getting put into this thing called the eighth sphere. Now again, I'm playing with concepts. These are just something that got stimulated with me, and I don't want to get too lost. But just something seems to be there. And this also is going to tie in with some things that John Lash has said about this sense of mitosis. But I'm not done with unpacking this other thing here. So again, this is a thought exercise. This is my thought exercise I'm sharing with you. So besides the theft of imagination, like in other words, it's like this sphere. It's almost like, okay, we put out all these false realities. How would they react? So they put them out, we react, and then those reactions are stored as a database in this thing called the eighth sphere, according to Steiner. Or according to Daniel, according to Steiner. And there's just something very intriguing about that as a concept. First of all, I like the idea of them stealing our fire. Because, the whole thing is that supposedly Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to the humans. And this to me is like a kind of case of, the angelic mafia stealing fire from humans. Because we have the imagination. Why do we have it? Because Sophia gave it to us. Along with Delete. But she's the wisdom. He's the intent. Together, you will get things done. Because wisdom can sit in itself. Intent is when things, now that wisdom starts to move. So this eighth sphere really seems to be like just some kind of equivalent of like almost like the NSA gathering all that information that at some other time might be useful because they've gathered it all. Okay, so I kind of loosely gave this concept of the theft of our imagination by creating situations that are not real, because right now the world has been underneath their influence. Sophia's awakening and now her correction are correcting that. And where those of us who have reached her, it's amazing. I'm not looking at the chat right now. Any people who've done some of this work might be able to speak the difference between when we were like kind of like wandering around trying to collate all the information, and then when we got connected to her, the clarity and how what was bullshit was kind of like really clearly bullshit. Or even its utility. Not that it was all bullshit, but like the part that had real utility and application could be seen, and then all the clutter that sometimes came with it. The extra. Things just really got clear. So I'm not looking at the chat right now. I don't know if any of you are speaking, because I'm going to try and stay focused here. I'm going to come into the chat in a moment. So, okay, did I get that? I think I got that impact. Maybe I can come into the chat. I just didn't want to, had to be really, I really didn't want to lose where I was going. I know, you know something, I understand what you're saying, Madfinger. But they have become, the problem is when we share it amongst ourselves, they work fine. It's when we try to have conversations outside of it, it becomes like, oh my God. And I totally can sympathize, empathize, and all that other ising there. For me, now I have to admit, when I use the word Sophia, more often than not, I actually understand. And sometimes when I'm writing and I actually want to speak about her, I don't say Sophia, I say wisdom. Because that is what Sophia means. She is the quality of wisdom from the originator. You know, the galactic wisdom. She is the galactic wisdom. So in many ways, that's kind of how I lose her quote name without losing her, because she is wisdom. I don't know who Tobias Churton is. Oh, the hair flip got you, huh, Raksha? Yeah, well, apparently, I like what Fox J said. Yes, she's a young Aeon. Yeah, apparently the originator realized that a galaxy without wisdom wasn't going to get very far. Don't know about Gary Lackman. I tend to focus on what expands my wisdom. I'm not very well, you know, a lot of the names that people that are very familiar to other people are not necessarily familiar to me. The word Gary Lackman does, I mean, I can't put my finger on it, but Gary Lackman does have some, there's almost like some kind of like, yeah, we might know something there. And I like, my thoughts on any bass player, I like bass players. I'm not, and like some people say, do I have like a favorite bass player? I don't have a favorite anything. I have one son, he's my favorite son. So, yeah, favorites are like, I never, even all my life as a bass player, I had multiple bass players I liked. I never understood favorite. Favorites, yeah, favorite. I don't know. I don't know how people do that, actually. Oh, yes. Okay, thank you, Oswald. Yeah, I've heard him speak. Not, you know, I've heard I heard him on Aeon Gnostic Bites. He's been on Miguel's show a few times. That's how I feel about him. Oh, please, Lee. Don't even go there. I mean, really, basically, when it comes to almost any of the Western esoteric, a lot of the Western esoterica, I like alchemy. I mean, there's a lot, you know, there's a lot to alchemy. It's when it starts, you know, it's when there's a lot to alchemy, but there's also a lot of archontic crap in Western metaphysics. Oh, who couldn't like Chris Squire? although I mean, his tone certainly worked for him. It was, but the funny thing is, John Entwistle of the Who. John Entwistle of the Who was one of my favorite bass players. He's the one who engineered the rotor sounds. He's the one who came up with it. And the reason he wanted rotor sounds is because there were so many harmonics in there. It allowed him as a bass player to create a lot more of a sound with them. And I think, you know, I think Chris Squire did great work with that kind of sound. I love the way he played. Well, look at the people he's playing with. Howe and Rick Wakeman. I mean, those are some, and then the different drummers. Bill Bruford, I think, was there. What does Gary Busey have to do with anything in this conversation, Lee? I don't get that. I don't understand the Gary Busey in this conversation at all. Hello, Soul Travel. How are you? Tony Levin. Tony Levin, who actually was from Woodstock. He's thoughtful, but I don't know why we're talking about bass players. But Tony Levin, I mean, and Tony, what was really great is Tony Levin actually was not in Woodstock. Tony Levin was probably the least spectacular bass player amongst a lot of bass players. But he got the gig. He was dependable, and he made it work. And he is, he's become, he always was a respectable bass player. But he also had a great work ethic. He showed up at the right times, did the right gigs, and has managed to go on. And there's the musician, and there's also the way the musician handles themselves in the world of music without getting eaten alive. And, Tony Levin did a really great job. Although I have to, I have to admit, I mean, I could go off into a whole musical rant, and maybe I should let you do that. Maybe I should let somebody pull me into a musical thing and get out of this other stuff. And then go like, yeah, sure. Ask me about bass players. Steve Harris, yeah. I mean, these are all really solid guys. How about, here we go, Tal Wilkenfeld or whatever, the one who played with Jeff Beck. Oh, man. I like, there's that, because the bass players I really enjoyed were the ones that had some kind of Motown influence. I mean, I love Paul McCartney too. So you have James Jamerson of who played a lot in those in the Motown stuff. Then you have Carol Kay, who also had that Motown groove. Tal Wilkenfeld, I think is her name. She also had that Motown groove. And then one of the more, hello RC, and to me one of the more interesting bass players, because he had the Motown groove, and you hear it real early on, but he also had some of that Jack Bruce attack, was Timmy Bogart of Vanilla Fudge, and then later on in Beck, Bogart, and Apogee. As far as like a blend of in the pocket kind of knowing how to play that do-do boom boom do-do-do-do-do, that kind of stuff, and then also blistering attack, Timmy Bogart was amazing. And a lot of people don't know Timmy Bogart, but like in the very first Vanilla Fudge album, the one that they had You Keep Me Hanging On, they did Bang Bang, the Sonny and Cher song, and they did they did covers on their first album, and they did amazing arrangements of them, including You Keep Me Hanging On. And Timmy Bogart's Motown roots are really, really showing there, but also his he's an Irishman, and he had to be one of those real smart Irishmen, which there are quite a few of. And just blistering attack, and he's playing with Carmen Appice on drums. They were quite a rhythm section. Enjoy being. Hello, enjoy being. Yeah, we have. Let's say we have Mari is from Down Under. RC is from Down Under, and then of course New Zealand. New Zealand is in the house. So was my stuff on the Aramin stuff? I guess wasn't working. Hello, Niche. That wasn't flying, huh? It was deep, and maybe it. I only saw it last night. Didn't have a whole lot of time to unpack that stuff. But boy, I found it real. So anyway, I guess what was interesting is there's a concept and mitosis. Mitosis has been brought up a few times in some of the talks. Probably, I'm going to say 2 or 3 times in the course of the Mandela Effect Decoded, and maybe another time or so in the Radio Gaianim broadcasts, videos. And he's like, you know, there is something to this mitosis that maybe he's finished unpacking. I'm still trying to unpack it. I'm sensing something to it. And this 8th sphere, with so much of the copying from our intelligence and our imagination being stored in this other sphere, I'm like, oh man, there's something almost like this sphere being like a fake amoeba of sorts. I don't know. All I know is, boy, when I saw that guy, I cannot, his name will not, Occult Fan, that's his name. When I saw him last night, I went, oh boy, this fellow's in a state. And I know, like I said, some of us have been in that state. And he had said he was in the state from watching the X series, but it was the last one. I mean, the last one was, there was something in that delivery that was certainly Riley, you can. Yes, I do, Oswald, because in a lot of, like in English, in Cockney talk, a lot of times you drop the first letter, so Saruman would be rendered Aramin. So yeah, I do think Saruman is named after Aramin. Yeah, apparently we're going to be buffering a little bit here. Hey. Well, I know I buffered out there. And what's interesting that somebody brings up Saruman is because one of the things I brought up in, as I was kind of starting to take my leave of the forum, at least for an extended vacation, was I was referring to the scouring of the Shire, which Sir Peter Jackson left out because the Queen would not be pleased about soldiers, people coming home from battle afar, finding fuckery at home, and then organizing the people to throw out the fuckery, which is what the scouring of the Shire was. And who was in the Shire? Because the movies didn't, the movies kill off Saruman at Orthanc. No. When the 4 hobbits come back to the Shire, Saruman is in the Shire with Grima, and they had taken over the place and had gotten all the supreme nose picker and thuggish people to kind of like play the part of police. Okay, I see I got incoming from Raksha here. Oh yeah, yeah. There's no. I don't think no. The to me the Kundalini experience and Sophia or wisdom, they're. I mean, I think you could obviously maybe meet Sophia during sensory experience, but it seems to me to be part of something that's part of who we are, but when it's not managed properly, it can end up in these kind of psychoses. And there's a certain the thing that I remember most, the most psychotic part of it, again, brain swelling, psyche swelling, was the sense of a certain messianic like need to bring the word. I mean, like, you have gotten this revelation and now you must share it with the world. I mean, it is powerful, and that messianic drive is not wisdom, it's archontic. Okay, we have a delay here, and so Raksha says, does Kundalini experience relate to a connection with Sophia, even unconsciously, or can you have a Kundalini experience while defiling Sophia? Wouldn't think so, but want to clarify. Yeah, you can. Matter of fact, in recalling my own experience, it was certainly, I would say, Sophia wisdom defiling, because it gave me a messianic fervor, and wisdom does not have that messianic fervor. Yeah, I like that term, Raksha. But I mean, again, it could be just, it could be more archontic gaslighting with this eighth sphere. But I totally get how at an emotional level, you could have what Monroe called loosh, and that produces something that could certainly feed or nourish certain levels of beings. I'm not sure that the beings that feed off that are necessarily archons themselves, because there's a lot of critters in the lower fourth dimension, a lot of critters, and so I can imagine that if we humans had some kind of energetic output, that there might be a class of unphysical fauna that might, feast on it, kind of like, like little fishes or something, floating around. But when he kind of mentioned what was being extracted from humans and stored through the way the archons kind of create scenarios for us to react to, and then collecting that intelligence, our intelligence, again, it's everything from them is theft and then mimicry or copy and pasting. I could see some utility to that from their perspective. Yeah, that's one of the tricky things, Amanda. When you first get out of your body, you're right there. Like I said, I think I explained on one of these live streams about twice I had two quote unquote abduction attempts, and that I was able to interrupt. One through sheer force of will, and the other one through calling on Christos. And the moment I used that name, everything cleared up. And this is certainly prior to my own Gaian awakening. This is while I was still drinking, I think. Or maybe it was right after I quit drinking, but boy, there was some took a long time for the toxins to get out of my liver. But I had a really profound, what I then realized was an astral experience about a year or so ago at the foot of my bed, because I thought I was sitting up. I thought I was sitting at the foot of my bed, and what had made me sit up was that I thought an earthquake was happening. It seemed like the room was shaking. So I sit up on my bed, and I'm looking and nothing in the room, and I'm looking at my room just like I'm looking at it right now. I think I've said this before, but nothing was shaking, but my bed was shaking. And I didn't know what to make of it. And then finally I realized that that was me being out of my body, but not knowing I was out of my body. And how very, very real that was. I mean, again, it took me a while to realize that I had not actually been sitting at the end of my bed. It was only some of the bizarre things like a bed shaking and nothing else moving, when there should have at least been air coming out of the bottom from the mattress hitting the floor that would have made something move. I mean, I have enough little stuff and papers that would have been affected by some air. Like if I were to pick up my mattress right now and drop it once, things, tissues would fly, and it would create effects. And I'm looking in my room, and I'm riding this bucking bronco, but there's no effects in the room. And so that was kind of fairly profound for me when it comes to people who experience being abducted by quote-unquote aliens. And of course, archons are aliens in their own way. And so based on how real, like I said, it took me a while to realize that what had happened to me. So now I can understand why people can be abducted astrally and not know that it was astral, and be completely convinced that they were really in their body. Because I was convinced I was in my body, and it took me a while, like a couple of days before man, that was really bizarre. So this to me gave great clarity to how many people who are abducted would experience it and not be able to tell the difference. If you don't know, see, that's the whole thing. If you do actually leave your body consciously, then you know you're in the astral. Should you suddenly wake up in your astral body, it's like waking up in your body, and you don't know it. So that's pretty tricky. That's kind of tricky, but it certainly explains to me, it can explain so many of abductions, especially when people do occasionally feel themselves going through walls, and why they would come back absolutely convinced that they had experienced it in their physical body. Now, the other tricky thing, sleep paralysis is when we wake up in our astral body, but we're trying to move our physical body, and so we're not trying to move our astral body because we think we're in our physical body. And it is terrifying. That was my first abduction experience, and like I said, that was sheer force of resistance. And then the second one, I just happened to mention Christos' name, and boy, boom, everything cleared up. And then the third one was many, many years later. And here's the other thing that's interesting about the astral body. If you, like the thing is, like, people will come back and they'll say, well, how about this mark that I didn't have when I went to sleep? The astral body interfaces with the etheric body. The etheric body is the energy part of our body, of our physical body. So, and that's why I preferred, when I do my journeying, to not astral travel, to kind of project my consciousness, but not my astral body, and do my work that way. And so if you get banged up in your astral body, and then it comes back into your physical body, the astral banging translates to the etheric, which then translates into the physical body. Yeah, Nagual is something to it's it's kind of like deep sea diving. It takes a while before you really get the hang of it and can do it safely. Let me see if I missed anything here. Glad to delight, Niche. I read your comment there. Hello, Callan. Good. I'm enjoying some of the things. Fox the Dre asked a good question. Anyone out there experienced their plasmatic double? I can't say I have. Oh yeah. Yes, Callan. Immediately. Matter of fact, as soon as I got the thought out of my head or said it with my astral mouth, bang, everything just reset. And it seemed like I was able to move my physical body. The interesting thing is it seems to me the most actually written. I mean, there's a lot of ideas about the jinn, but especially that spelling largely comes from a very short surah in the Quran. And the jinn, certainly there seems to be something to it, but I don't. The archons are our issue, and who they pretend to be. But once you kind of plug in, once you plug into the earth, once you start sharing your consciousness with wisdom, the archons are almost, kind of, they fall into the mosquito category. Sometimes you don't, sometimes you hear a mosquito, you can hear it, so you're aware of it, and you won't get bitten. And sometimes you don't notice the mosquito till they've sunk their little thing into you. Yeah. And so, but to me, once you plug into wisdom, I'm using that name. I'm using the English word for the Greek word Sophia. It changes it because you're into the consciousness of the earth, and it really changes your perception. There's actually so much less confusion. There's still plenty of exploring to do, but exploring is not the same as what-ifing. Exploring is exploring. It's not like, what if I go down this path? It's like, well, let me find out what's down this path. It's not a what-if mental exercise. it's an exploration. It's very different. I wouldn't pick on the Quran alone. To me it's part of a certain family of texts, and you know, it's one of a family. Each one written in a, you know, slightly different, I guess, you know, the ones that got through the net the last time. You know, the first net was Torah, second net was Christianity. Actually, the very first net was Zoroastrianism. Was Zoroaster. He's the one who started bringing down the sky gods. Although it's funny, in his early stuff, he still has great reverence for the earth, but he starts bringing in the boys. So, you know, Zoroaster starts bringing the boys in. And they're, you know, it's in their name. And then, you know, there was exposure when, you know, Cyrus was a Zoroastrian, and Cyrus was the one who freed the, you know, the Judaic tribes, the 3 tribes, Benjamin, Judah, and Levi, from Babylon, and sent some people to help them rebuild their temple. So there was, you know, they picked up, I think, some Zoroastrian ideas from there. And I think it later, you know, even the concept of Messiah, the Savior, is started with Zoroaster. So he brings in the boys from the sky, good boys and bad boys, brings in the concept of Savior, and also brings in the concept of the end times. This is something all of those religions have in common. A Savior or Messiah or a Revelator, and an end of times showdown. And that same end of times finds its way ultimately even into Norse thought in Ragnarok. Oh yeah, I mean, totally. The interesting thing, Fox Adres, she puts Islam as a Catholic invention. Well, it just, you know, Fatima, his wife, was either Catholic or, you know, or I think she was Catholic, and she was also fairly wealthy. So it seems like she's, you know, had a little bit of some input there. But you know, again, this is one of the reasons sometimes I like to, you know, I enjoy offline discussions with people, because, you know, especially me. I mean, I'm putting out something that anybody could come up and see, and I'm not really in the mood for inflaming people. I'm in the mood for us to get our act together, and where the main part of the discussion is where we're going, and what our system is, and let the other people, you know, let the dead bury their own. Yeah, Sam. What I'm trying to not do is publicly kick anybody in their grapes. There's all kinds of stuff that where Sophia's correction is going to have a lot of revelation that will have some very interesting effects. Hello, Jet Pet. And Sam, I don't know if I greeted you, so hello. Oh boy, wow, that was an hour and 15 minutes. So this is an interesting thing. In many ways, I guess we all experience like time is speeding up. But I have to admit, when I engaged in this last lunar shift, first time I went out, looked at the crescent moon, kind of got imprinted, and then got my Dakini instruction. Now going, we're just coming on the end of that cycle, that shift. Where everything else, where in most cases it almost seems like everything happened like just yesterday. I even have a song I wrote that. This last month, like this last shift, this last lunar cycle, seems like it was almost a year of packed with stuff. I mean, or maybe a year is a little, or at least a season. Let's put it that way. This last lunar cycle was almost experientially almost like a season long, where most other cases we're all experiencing this speeding up of time, but my experience of this last lunar cycle was, it's almost like, oh, we're coming up on another shift. I'm interested in what this next shift is. It has been so full. Like full. Yeah, anger. I mean, anger is great, like a storm. It can be very cleansing. But, you know, nobody wants to, it's not a storm staying in one place and just storming and storming and storming. That usually wreaks havoc. Oh, really? That's good. It's perigee, so this should be quite a that I'm looking forward to that then. Thank you for that. Thank you for that intel, Fox of Joy. That's good intel. So in case anybody, I don't want to just what Fox of Joy is saying with the word perigee is when the moon is closest to the Earth. So as this new lunar cycle begins, as the next one will have 1 Dakini instead of 2. That should be. I mean, here is my first lunar cycle. I'm dealing with 2 Dakinis having their way with me. It was quite delicious, but who did they keep me busy? So they're gonna be coming on, and I will, either Wednesday, it's probably Thursday when I will be able to see the crescent moon, especially since we're supposed to have some rain on Wednesday, which is what happened last lunar cycle. The first possible night I might have seen it, we had too many clouds. The next night I saw it, and the magic began. This is what. Who asked me about what kind? Oh yeah, Oswald. I roll my own. The organic American Spirit. If there wasn't organic tobacco, I wouldn't smoke. So, and I roll my own. No filters. Although right now, if you see this little holder, if you look here, I have to start changing it. There's a little piece of cotton I put in there. So that, and then I use my little tweezers and I pull the cotton out. Then I'll roll up a ball and stick a new one in. Wakaru Nui. They go together very well. Those 3 words: wisdom, discretion, and appreciate. That's kind of almost what I was talking about, like being plugged into wisdom, into the earth wisdom, and being a part of her dreaming, is that you get this discretion. When you're looking out into the world and there's all this incoming, you have like this real sense of discretion. Oh, it's starting to get all bare over here. It's a warm day, and I have my overhead fan on reverse, because if I didn't, I'd be pulling my hair out of my mouth every 2 minutes, maybe every 1 minute. And what's good about this little pipe fitting is that it prevents me from getting my hands all yellow. Plus, I get a little bit more because I use very short papers. They're they're not the same length as other papers. So this allows me to get a little bit more out of it. So, did anybody else experience this last lunar cycle as, in like looking back at it, it's like, wow, that was a lot packed into months that have been like in many ways, like here we are, we're, in the middle of May already, and it seems like it was, New Year's. And even like with the, it seemed like, here we are at almost an hour, 20 minutes after the live stream began, and it seemed like it was a half an hour ago. But I mean, so there was definitely a real difference, tuning into the lunar cycle, the Dakini on shift, being aware of what her mood is, and allowing that what the quality of that mood is to flow through myself or yourself or ourselves, oneself, and just how in retrospect it was like that was a month. Whew, that was quite a month. Well, Sam, I'm always really happy to hear anybody that feels that they're getting something from, looking at, embracing, working with Gnostic thought. I do. What is Gnostic gets a little tricky. Most of us here will call ourselves, at least, there's a few people here who actually will call ourselves, I guess, Gnostics in a way. For lack of a better term, I will call myself a Gnostic. And there's at least two other people here who I won't name them, let them name themselves, who probably consider themselves Gnostics. And but it's based on the Sophianic narrative instead of the Nag Hammadi narrative, which is a blend. There's Gnostic stuff in the Nag Hammadi text, but to call that to call the Nag Hammadi text Gnostic, that's to me, it's playing a little loose with the word Gnostic. So okay, perigee in 3 days. So yeah, I'm looking forward to have only one Dakini to bat me around. The two was hysterical. It was really quite an initiation. Loved every minute of it. I mean, I really did, but whoa. They done me good. Boy, did they do me. Last time I was with two, I was drunk. And it was many years ago. I was in my 20s. Early 20s. And I'm now 65, so it was, it was a little past last year. Oh, okay, Sam, you know something? I had somebody in my GMOP group who recently listened to one of, I don't know if it was the Lisa Harrison. There's just a few places where you kind of, John just sits down, and yes, that is JLL is the only one who has delivered it, because he's the only one who so far has gotten it. And my own, when I was preparing this, oh, by the way, you know, I've been saying John and I were going to do a show together. It's still a possibility. I emailed him today, and he's just been swamped with stuff. That's why there's been no radio guy in him either. He's been really kind of handling a lot of stuff. So it wasn't like he was too busy for me. He's been too busy, including for Ginny. So I was just, because I even told him, I said, I don't mind it. You didn't do a show with me. Do a radio guy in him. Come on, let's, you know, it's time for another show, John. Yeah, the Sophianic narrative is it. To me, that is the narrative for those of us on Earth to do it, for us to finally be able to live on this planet and understand who we are, what we are, our place in the galaxy. Because our place in the universe isn't as important as our place in the galaxy. Galaxy is a big enough place to handle. So, I'm glad, Sam, because it really was, it has been transforming for anybody who has done it. Absolutely transforming. And it changes. You don't, you know, you stop with all the what ifing. You stop. Again, you still have endless exploring. Exploring doesn't stop, but it's a different kind of exploring. Thank you, Raksha. But I had a friend of mine who said, you know, I finally listened to John Lash delivering the narrative, and it has changed my life. I'm following things, Raksha, thank you. I'm noticing the sophistry. My definition of sophistry is wannabe philosophers who engage in a circle jerk, can't come, and so instead they just piss into the center. That's what sophistry, that's my definition of sophistry. And, you know, who were the ones who complained about Socrates and through a democratic vote had him put to death? It was the sophists. The sophists were responsible for Socrates being put to death. So sophists are very, you know, again, it's they would like to be philosophers, but they apparently don't love wisdom, so they get in little circle jerks about it. And often, like I said, they can't come, so we end up getting a piss storm instead. Sam, for me, I mean, I've been in the narrative for a few years, but I have to tell you, I drank what? That's good, Nish. When this last new moon was the first time, and the interesting thing was, in my back and forth with John Lash, it just, he took it upon himself to give me that information and give me the link in meta history to the Dakini, the lunar cycles. So I went out and I caught the crescent moon, and even shared my experiences with him. He said, "Oh, when we do the video, I want to share that," because he thought it was pretty good. And that was with me seeing the two moons, how the moon insisted on me seeing two crescents And that was my little hint that there was 2 Dakinis on shift. But Sam, if you have the time, if you're not indoors and have to be indoors for whatever responsibilities that we might have that have us indoors, if you can go outside as the sun is setting, and there's a nice window there, and even even when it's getting a little dark, but to catch that crescent moon when it's still kind of like you can still see some of the sun is still keeping the bottom of the sky a little bit lit, and attuning to that crescent moon, whew, now, boy, does that take you into deep immersion. So if you have a chance to do that on Thursday, if on Thursday evening, and now that's going to be somewhere between 8 and 9 o'clock, maybe even closer to 9, depending on where you are, go out as when the sun is setting and the moon will be there. Like, in other words, the moon is in the western sky, and stare at it and clear your mind and see what comes to you. And even if nothing comes to you, you're attuning to it. And then even like the last time, I didn't know what Dakinis were coming on. All I know was I was getting 2. And then I came in after that, and John had just put up a radio guy in them explaining who came on shift. And that clarity helped me define it a little bit better. It would have been interesting if I had known nothing, but I think it's very helpful in the beginning to maybe have a little guidance. And John's been real good about that. He's been an excellent teacher. Things are getting a little confrontational in the chat here, and I know I'm here speaking my piece. Yeah, that was really funny. Niche, I drank what? And anybody, even if if you haven't totally, you're still not sure about the whole Sophianic narrative, if you're really interested, I mean, the moon's a beautiful thing, provided you don't think it was towed there and put their body on Anunnaki or something. Thank you for the people in the chat managing there and allow me to kind of just keep my center a little bit. I really appreciate it. Did Raksha leave? I see somebody say hugs, or maybe just somebody sending Raksha some hugs. Raksha deserves lots of hugs. Ah. You're welcome, Sam. Share, that's one of the great things is this, the sense of sharing what are information, intel, personal gnosis, and gnosis. And just in case that word isn't, gnosis is what you know from having experienced something kind of viscerally. Knowing that fire burns is gnosis. Being told that fire, if you've never put your hand in fire and somebody told you fire burns, and you just have it as a concept that fire burns, but you haven't burned yourself yet, you don't have the gnosis that fire burns yet. So gnosis is a knowledge with an experience to it. So I don't want to use the word gnosis lightly. Yes, tomorrow. Right. Yeah. Irenaeus is it is interesting how that from the ancient world, around that same time that the Gnostics were knocking about, or the Nag-Gnostics, I'll call them, the Christian, Judeo-Christian Gnostics. But apparently Irenaeus had a little, or at least he was honing in on the Gnostic part of that stuff, because obviously the more Judeo-Christian part wouldn't be bugging him. It was the real genuine Gnostic stuff that was pressing his buttons. And it's really amazing how the opponents to Gnostic thought were the ones who actually can be some of the cleanest sources of it. And John has mentioned that too. So yes, tomorrow night is the Moose and Mystic. Raksha and I do a live stream, starting the same time that this one did, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It's interesting, last night when I was on CW show, and at the end I decided to promote the show tomorrow night with Raksha and myself, then promoting this, because I'm really pretty happy with the crowd. Like, we have 23 people watching now, we got to about 25. I've been really happy with who has been showing up, because I know for me, I mean, I like to see more people, but the quality of how we all get along in the chat is very important to me. That counts more. I think that less of us having a really coherent and good time and with some focus is better than having a bunch of people showing up and some people not feeling like they fit in and then needing to act out because they don't feel like they just. That's just how they work. Thank you, Raksha. So I mean, I knew, last night, I was with, on a CW thing, and CW attracts his own crowd, and we do have some bleed over, but I just thought, you know what, this is Can't You Hear Me Gnostic, and that's not, I didn't feel Can't You Hear Me Gnostic was something that I would really be a good sell necessarily to that diverse a crowd. So I chose to promote Mystic and Moose. And we've had a very good turnout here. We're coming up on the last 20 minutes, or who knows, maybe we'll get going again. I'll run a little bit later. I've been very happy these past, I've been coming away feeling kind of like a little bit like flying. It also, the last 4 weeks have been during this last lunar shift that I've been very tuned into. Well said, Sam. Well said. Well, David Icke is another one. David Icke, the term archon is certainly in his language. But where is, the term archon was really brought back into the language by John Lash himself. Not that Elaine Pagels didn't have her chance to do it. Elaine Pagels was one of the first scholars to really crack into the Nag Hammadi text and write books about it, but she chose not to bring in the archon term because it ties into the demiurge and ties into Jehovah. So she chose to omit it. She purposely, or was guided to omit the whole archon. Good. Okay, RC, be well, and thanks for dropping by. So I really find that people who make a little bit of a living talking about the archons don't speak about it in a more informed way. But it is what it is, and it's not, let David Icke do what he does. To me, it's on us to. I really like what the gentleman from New Zealand put in about wisdom, discernment, appreciation. Because wisdom, you know, the ability to appreciate things is part of wisdom. And the other part of, you know, another part of wisdom is discernment. And so when David Icke is, you know, doing what David Icke does, for me, if we have made wisdom the center of our being, then we will have the discernment. And you know, there's just so much stuff out there, and that's and it sets up a lot of confusion, and that's because we're approaching it from our mental. We're not approaching it with wisdom, which is of our hearts. And the mind is very easily confused, and especially you put in a couple of emotional triggers, because a lot of us still do not have the second and third chakras properly in dialogue with each other. So it's very easy to trigger people, and get them into that what if, and this could be and that could be. Yeah, it's amazing how, I mean, Sophia, that's for me what is so glaringly missing from a lot of the Hermetic teachings and stuff. It's like, excuse me, where's our mother? Yes, Matt Finger said very well. Hey, Calendal, hello. But you know, like when I think of a people whose heads I would like to see on newly adorned on Kali's necklace, David Icke is not somebody who comes to mind. And yeah, the CEO of Nestle comes to mind. I mean, there are a lot of people come to mind, but somebody who says that water is not a right, doesn't understand, you know, that is clearly an adversary. Oh, well, even the term gospel, to me, you know, again, you know, like the Gnostic gospels and stuff like that. Oh, geez. Even looking at him, I mean, that CEO of Nestle's, I mean, that's a creepy looking guy, man. It is. The narrative, that pure narrative, and that's what I got. I shared it, and I'll just share it briefly again. When I was getting ready for me and asked for guidance about me for dealing with John, instead of me getting information on me, I got some information about John. And basically it was about the reason why he got the terma. And why even when he speaks, he speaks about how important the syntax is, and that syntax is crucial, and that's the point that you're making. Pure narrative is the key, Madfinger. It can't just be delivered any old way. It's not like, oh, this is the gist of the story. The gist won't work. There is a way it had to be told, and John was the intended for that. And then, of course, he's trying to, there's all this other stuff beyond the narrative now that needs unpacking. And that's different. But the narrative is the narrative. And from that narrative, you then the good kind of exploring can begin. Yeah, Kali's necklace. Yeah, our New Age jambalaya. Good word. Yeah, I used the term when I was kind of backing out of the forum a couple of days ago, because there was somebody who was particularly being a turd in the punch bowl, and I seemed to be the main one feeling that way. So I jokingly said, how about a punch bowl rebellion? That's where the punch bowl throws the turd out. Well, that's what I notice. A lot of people are using the archons as one of their, one of their demons. It feeds the fear porn. And then, of course, you'll have people who will, there's different stones that you can use. And let me tell you, one of the reason I even smoke now is I was getting some really bad projections into my head that were pure archontic projections, and I knew they were, but just because it was like being forced to watch snuff films almost. It would be the way I would explain it. And I remember from a few people saying, tobacco blocks their influence. And I remember, rolling my first cigarette. Hadn't smoked in 42 years. I quit smoking when I was 18. And back then I was smoking tobacco product. And I remember, so I lit up my cigarette. Of course, this is, my fresh, clean lungs, and I take in as little as I can, and I'm coughing, and I try taking a little bit more, and I'm coughing, and then of course that first nicotine gets into you, and it's like, ooh, boy. So here I am spinning and coughing. But I've also noticed that for the first time in some months that I wasn't getting this constant intrusion. And so that's one of the reasons that I started smoking, because it gave me instant relief. I mean, I was hacking and spinning, but I could feel the quiet in my head. I mean, here I was working at Omega, one of the sweetest places in the world, walking along paths, and for some reason, I mean, the slightest interaction with people sometimes would generate homicidal reaction movies. It was crazy. And tobacco broke that. I have noticed that. Fox or Dre. But the thing is, now we have the issue of I mean, there's still some kind of stuff bubbling around, and I think there's a lot of old programs that are still in play. Yeah, the correction. Well, there was I actually sent. I was at Giza Death Star, Joseph P. Farrell's thing, just to see what different articles he picks up, and apparently one of the reports was they found a new kind of DNA that has a knot, and they're calling it the eye motif. Well, thank you for sharing that, Maclovia Padilla. Yeah, that, I mean, I think that one of the reasons white buffalo calf woman, you know, at least in according to, I think it's the Lakota law, was to, you know, help them resist it. And also, when you don't smoke tobacco all the time, when you do smoke it, the nicotine is pretty powerful. I mean, I remember when I was at Omega, I was only smoking 6 cigarettes a day. And when I had been, you know, doing my normal 6 cigarettes a day when I was off, and then I started working, and I realized I couldn't have a cigarette in the morning and then go to work because it fucked me up too much. I actually had to wait until after lunch and then have a little time to recover from the cigarette. I mean, when you don't smoke much tobacco, I smoke more tobacco than I should. Once I get busy, I won't be smoking so much again. Sitting around, and a lot of it is also has been sitting on my chair and also dealing with, you know, weekly meetings with some people that can be challenging for me, and the cigarettes just kept me sane. And cheaper than other things that might keep me sane, but at the same time shut down other things. But now that I have my CBD paste, boy, are my cannabinoid receptors happy, and I'm so much clearer and energized. I love that CBD paste. That is good stuff. I had the good fortune when I was in Woodstock of being with somebody who had been initiated. He had been a sun dancer and was a pipe carrier, and we did an Inipi ceremony with him. It was quite powerful. It was very instructive. It's interesting. I do have Mohawk blood in me, and they don't have the Inipi. They have the sauna, the longhouse, and I have to admit there's something in my genetics that prefers the longhouse to the Inipi. But man, you got the Inipi. The Inipi is hardcore. The Inipi is hardcore. I got the paste from well, actually I got it at my local health food store. But I pay $32 for 200 milligrams. You can buy it at mynutra.com. They sell it for $19. I don't know what the shipping is. Yeah. And the interesting thing, like what you're saying, Mari, a sauna, the name that the Iroquois or that nation called themselves Haudenosaunee. That's in their native language. They call themselves Haudenosaunee. Now they translate it as the people of the longhouse. So there's the how, and in each case you have a little bit of Germanic and a little bit of, like, you know, the Scandinavian custom. And as we kind of know, it seems that some Vikings had been there before. So it's really kind of interesting on just who the Iroquois Nation people genetically were. Yeah, I'm going to take a little of the paste now, a little bit more, a little less than I normally take. And it's just, it really calms the nervous system without getting you all buggy. I don't recommend anybody else to put a sharp knife in their face. But it's called it's my Nutraceuticals, and the website is mynutra.com, and it's made from grinding the whole plant and then heating it up in some specific kind of coconut oil, and it's just it's very good. I mean, it just so satisfies, and because they do it by grinding it up and then cooking it up into some coconut oil, and that makes the paste. There's no like hexane or butane to remove from it, which usually there's still trace amounts in it, and those trace amounts are carcinogenic or carcinogens. So I really, and they have a very good 17-minute video explaining the difference between the paste and other extracts. And I never tried the other extracts. I was fortunate enough, and it also was like the bottles of it were like $91, and this is $32. So that was like 1/3 the price. So not only did I was it something I could afford, but ultimately it looks like I actually ended up getting what I would consider the superior product. Oh yeah, well Columbus, Columbus is again part of his story, whoever he is, and it's not our story. So history is not our story. Well, this paste is not made from the sativa. This is hemp. This is hemp paste. This is not. This is, it's from the industrial hemp. This paste, not from the THC plants. So, like in other words, I'm in Virginia. We couldn't, Virginia is not a place you'd want to get caught with a bag of weed. But they now sell the hemp paste, the CBD paste. So that's great. So now I have something that works to me far better than the other stuff, and for what I need. I really just wanted something. I'm a Vata dosha. I have a really wiry nervous system, and and I'm an alcoholic. I quit drinking in 2010 finally for the last time, and it's been quite successful. But I get a little jiggy sometimes, and trying to get that figured out, I now have it figured out. CBD paste is just magic. So it's not a hashish reduction. It has nothing. It doesn't have the pollen. It's not made from the resins that that make up the sativas and the indica plants, which are the psychoactive ones. Hemp is basically not psychoactive. So I mean, so please, mynutra.com. If you're interested in it, I mean, it's the same thing. I pay $32. They sell for $19.99. I would call that $20. I haven't ordered it from them, so I don't know what the shipping is. But even if shipping were $12 and made it so that it was $32 to get in your hands, like it's $32 to get in my hands, man, is it worth it? Yeah, well, interesting. I think a lot of times with people who, who really lean on weed to kind of calm themselves down, they're using the weed to get the cannabinoids. And, so it, and they end up, with the THC too, which, can at certain times can be very delightful. At other times, not so delightful. I know on Friday we had a rehearsal when a friend of mine came over with some other things, and I didn't during rehearsal, because the last time he came over I did it before we began. It was the worst rehearsal I had ever done in my life, because I had finally was doing other things, and so this last time they came over, he said, hey, no, I'm never going to have another embarrassing rehearsal like that again, because it'd been a while, it'd been weeks. I've been doing a CBD paste, and finally somebody showed up with something else, and I went, okay, bad decision. I can't tell. It's just hard for me to overemphasize how, for somebody who often had, did rely on Mother Nature for to manage my wiry nervous system. Now I have found the Mother Nature that is not controversial, and in many ways it's more energizing. It's just great. I sleep better. I need less sleep, and when I wake up, I don't have any kind of like still in me like that. It's just amazing. I love it. I guess so, but apparently Foxadre, I mean, just using hemp you know, the regular old-fashioned hemp that nobody ever used for getting high on, it seems to be what Mama, you know, has it well figured out. And then there's the other stuff. I mean, they all have their purposes. I just want to feel comfortable in my body, especially in this fucked up world. Beautiful planet with this archontic world built on it. It's really a weird place to be right now. But this was the kind of the solution. You know, how to have that sense of being able to take deep breaths and have calmness in the middle of insanity without the other stuff. Yeah, I agree with Sam. That's really, correction is correction. And what correction is about removing the errors. That's the syntax that I like. We don't have right and wrong so much, and, you know, sin and righteousness. We have error, and then we have correction. And when we correct, when we're in correction, we're in the Tao, so to speak. We're in the way, you know. We don't have laws. We have there's a way of doing things. There's and through our agreements, it's so different from the archontic system. Very different. Well, they use the whole plant, Fox Dre. They use the hemp blot. They use the flower, they use the whole plant basically, and they grind it up. And that's how they put it together. So they will be using the hemp blossoms also. I mean, when I took my first dose, I took a really pretty small dose. And that's when I was getting into the vehicle I was driving to drive like, you know, half a mile away. So I put on my tongue, and then when I got out of the car, I went, wow, this isn't psychoactive, but there's a presence to when it enters your bloodstream. Yeah, this is really great. I mean, this doesn't create a fuzz. This doesn't create a like some insulation from the fuckeries. What this does is it provides that proper insulation that my nervous system needed. It's just my nerves that kind of, you know, I guess they help the myelin sheath, and I'm not getting discharges into my muscles and everything else. It's kind of like the nervous energy staying in the nerves. And now that the nervous energy isn't getting all over the place, it's actually channeling up into my brain, and I'm ending up with greater clarity and greater focus and more energy. It's just... It's the shit, man. Hello, Aaron. So, anyway, that's my gushing about CBD paste, and just how you know what a gift from our mother that you know all the plants are, and the whole idea that anything that nature provides us would have some archontic entity making it illegal. I mean, that is the most. You know, again, it's like an apple. Can you imagine if they decided that you couldn't eat apples and you could be sent to prison for having an apple? That's as stupid as the whole thing around. Anything that grows. Anything. Hello, Zach. Yeah, nature has everything we need. It's almost like the planet and nature, has its act together. I mean, they're really, even, you know, once you tune into nature and allow yourself to grok it, to use that stranger from, you know, that Robert Heinlein thing. That was a good term, grok, G-R-O-K. Kind of a holistic with a W way of apprehending things. Yes. I grok. So we'll be saying goodnight to each other very shortly. I am really happy, Madfinger, that you kind of got a little bit of a base conversation going. At first, it was like a little bit of a shock to where I was, but once I realized, I said, you know something, he might be helping me out here. Oh, I don't have. I wish I don't do I don't have the capacity for Hangouts because I don't use Google Hangouts. I just stream from my OBS. One of these days, maybe I'll figure out Google Hangouts and then I can have them. And I can see a Hangout would be interesting. Could he actually be really productive? Because then, you know, I'm a lot more open when I'm not putting down something in for the public domain. I'm you know, a little bit conscious that it's just out there for everybody to see, and I think some things are better said. You know, and there are certain things you know, it's just better that you have like a little bit of a kind of a circle for that, a little like some, you know, serious sacred space. Tomorrow after the Mystic and the Moose, Raksha is saying. So if you join us, if you join Raksha and myself for our live stream tomorrow night, that starts at the same time this one does. We'll probably roughly run about the same amount of time, or maybe less, maybe a little more, whatever, until we're done. And then we can have a hangout then. And thank you, Moose. Thank you greatly. It's interesting, it's so nice and warm now. And I had a shirt on, and I said, you know what? I don't need to have a shirt. I got my shawls and stuff on, so that'll be enough. And it made a big difference. Well, thank you, Sam, for joining us during the wee hours of your time. Yeah, that's right. You were like 5 hours difference or something like that. So, you know, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning for you. It'll be what it'll be, Mari. I mean, sometimes it's casual. I mean, usually the after show hangouts are casual because they're not, you know, they're meant to hang out. So my guess, Mari, would be that it'd be more casual. But sometimes, you know, sometimes we, you know, depending on the mood, we go places. It's kind of like what the group vibe is. What everybody can benefit from. And usually, you know, after a Mystic and Moose, you know, we've kind of already been a little serious. So during a hangout, I think a lot of times both of us want to you know, laugh a little bit. I mean, a lot of times the after shows can be quite fun and very, very humorous. A lot of belly laughs. Thank you for News from the Future. Enjoy being. So, I'd like to thank everybody. I'll thank everybody. I'll be really diplomatic, and I really appreciate what we're doing here, which is just kind of getting together, you know, and allowing me to kind of share some ideas and, you know, bring a little focus to something each week, and then for us to just generally get to know each other, and because the earth needs us. Gaia needs us. We need she needs hands and minds to be out here on the surface. Yes, thank you, Fox Dre. Thank you, you know, to all, and thank you for the moderators who actually had a little something to deal with tonight. Thank you, Amanda. And so, that concludes this week's Can't You Hear Me Gnostic. How was your shift? Ready for the new? And so yes, we have a new shift coming up in the middle of the week. And anybody who is interested, cares or dares, and has the time to be out there at sunset, see if that crescent moon doesn't talk to you, or just allow yourself to just concentrate on it, and then see what the ride is like for the next month. And so let me hit the stop streaming.